Tonight we want to take a look at Samson and Delilah. And so we want to begin by looking at the good in their life. Then we will take a look at the bad in their life. And then, as always, we will draw what kind of a lesson we might learn from these peoples. As I had told you before, the story of Samson begins in the Bible with his birth. In Judges chapter 13, we're told about the story. Again, we hear this sentence being brought about. And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines 40 years. And there was a certain man of Zoah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and he had his wife was barren, and she bare not. And the angel of the Lord, whenever you see the phrase, the angel of the Lord, know that you're talking about Jesus in the Old Testament. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto the woman, and said unto her, Behold now, thou art barren, and bearest not. But thou shalt conceive, and bear a son. Now therefore, beware, I pray thee, and drink not wine nor strong drink, and eat not any unclean thing. Of course, if you go to the book of Deuteronomy and Leviticus, they lay down the law as to what was clean and unclean. For lo, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb. John the Baptist, remember, was also considered to be a Nazarite. And so he shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb. And he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hands of the Philistines. Very, very prophetic, because you and I both know that he doesn't finish the job, does he? So the angel of the Lord, of course, knowing all things, says he will begin to deliver his people. And so as we are told, then the woman came and told her husband, saying, A man of God came unto me, and his countenance was like the countenance of an angel of God. Very terrible. But I asked him not whence he was, neither did he tell me his name. But he said unto me, Behold, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and not drink no wine, no strong drink, neither eat any unclean thing, for this child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death. Then Manoah entreated the Lord, and said, O my Lord, let the name of God which thou didst send come again unto us, and teach us what we shall do unto the child that shall be born. Now look at the faith. He took God at his word, the child that shall be born. What do you really want us to do? How are we going to raise him? What should we do? He's a very good question. God promised him a child, a very special child, a child that's going to do much for God. So the parent wants to know, what am I supposed to do? How do I raise this child so he might accomplish these things? Very good question on Manoah's part. And so he asked that the angel might visit them again. And God heard the voice of Manoah. This is very telling. When God hears, remember John, according to John chapter 5, 1 John chapter 5, if God hears you, then you have the petition. And here it says, And God heard the voice of Manoah. And the angel of the God came unto the woman as she sat in the field, but Manoah her husband was not with her. And the woman made haste and ran and showed her husband, and said unto him, Behold, the man has appeared unto me. And he came unto me the other day. And Manoah arose and went after his wife, and came to the man, and said unto him, Art thou the man that speakest unto the woman? And he said, I am. What's the name Jesus goes by in the New Testament? The great I am. And Manoah said, Let not thy word come to pass. How shall we order the child? And what shall we do unto him? And the angel of the Lord said unto Manoah, all that I said unto the woman, let her beware. That is, raise him as a Nazirite. She shall not eat anything that comes out of the vine. See, now she can't eat it so that it doesn't get into the baby already. From the womb, remember, he will be a Nazirite. So not only can we not feed the baby anything, but she cannot eat anything that comes from the vine. She can't have any grapes, grape juice. She can't have any raisins. She can't have anything that comes from the vine in this particular case. And so the angel of the Lord explains what they should do. And he said, thou shalt detain me. I will not eat of the bread. If thou wilt offer a burnt offering, offer unto the Lord. For Manoah knew not that he was an angel of the Lord. Now, Manoah at this particular time wants to make sure he does the right thing. He wants to make a big offering, but God's not interested at this particular point in his offering. But when Manoah makes the offering, then, as I said before, the angel steps into it and disappears in the smoke. And for sure now they realized who this visitor really was. If they didn't, they kept calling him the man. The woman said, the man is here, the man is here. He comes by and are you the man who talked before? And all of a sudden now they knew that he was more than a man. Not by the way he came, but by the way he disappeared from them. So Samson then grows up. Of course, we know the story. He begins to clear the Philistines out of here, as we were told. And one of the things that he does in his removal, of course, is, so he was dedicated to the Lord as a child. He grew up as a Nazirite. One of the other interesting things or parts of his life. He was known for his strength. Now, he had a wedding. He wanted to marry a particular woman, so he says to his mom and dad, now remember, they were Jews. Jews are not allowed to intermarry with the people around them. But he sees a Philistine woman, and he falls in love with this woman. He has got to have this woman. Wrong. Not supposed to do it. Remember, he had a vow. He's the servant of the Lord. Begs and pleads with his parents. Parents give in. The father finds the woman, talks to her family, and a marriage is arranged between Samson and this woman. On the way to the wedding, Samson kills a lion. The lion roars at him and his parents. Samson jumps up out of the thing and tears the lion in half. Kills the lion with his bare hands. Later, as he's driving back by, he sees bees have made a hive in the lion. So during his wedding, he puts out a riddle. He says in his riddle, he uses this story about the lion that he has met earlier. And he had, so Samson went on, he put forth this riddle. He says, if you can declare within 7 days of the feast. Now he's going to give them a whole week to think about this, because he's pretty sure nobody knows it. If you can find it out, I will give 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments to each of you. That's a lot of stuff. All right. What's the riddle? Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. Out of the eater came forth meat. From the eater came something to eat, and out of him came something sweet. All right, guys, you have a week now to figure out what I'm telling you. Well, you know, if you weren't there, how could you possibly know? It's kind of unfair. It's like I'm driving home, I see a dead skunk on the side of the road, and I say to you, out of the little one comes smelly stuff. You know? Now, tell me what I'm talking about. You got no way of knowing it. This was something, an experience that he had. Wasn't known to the general public. But he makes a riddle out of it and challenges people to figure it out. And if you could figure it out, I will give you 30 changes of garments and 100 sheets. Well, of course, they've got to pay him if they don't get it. And this is pretty expensive gifts for that day and time. So the people begin to ask his wife, what in the world is it? He didn't tell his wife. He never told his wife what it was. His mom and dad maybe knew because they were there with him, but his wife has no idea. So for a week they begin to pressure, the Philistines begin to pressure his wife. Find out, find out, find out. This is very similar to the second woman in his life. Find out, find out, find out. Finally, she succumbs to the pressure. And she asks Samson, if you love me, hey, I'm not them. If you love me, you would tell me this story. So he says to her, well, you know, sweetheart, when Mom and Dad and I were driving over here, a lion jumped out. I jumped down. I killed the lion. The next day as we were driving by, I happened to see that bees had made a hive out of the lion. And that's my riddle. Out of the strong, out of the eater came meat, and out of the strong came sweetness. The lion was going to eat me. The lion was very strong. The lion became food for others by becoming a beehive. And Samson was able to dig in and eat some of the honey and the honeycomb. So he tells his wife. She tells the Philistines. So 7 days have gone by. It's the end of the feast. And on the last day of the wedding, Samson says, oh, I gave you all a riddle at the beginning of the week. Has anybody, and he's figuring nobody has, because nobody knew about this. It was a secret. Does anybody know the answer to my riddle? All of a sudden, the men in the room begin to stand up. Lots of them stand up. And they all say, oh, we know what it is. What is stronger than a lion? And what is sweeter than the honeycomb? Samson looks over and he realized his wife had told his story that he had just told her. So he gets mad. He goes out into the field, kills a whole bunch of people, takes their clothes, and gives it to these men. Then he takes off and he leaves his wife because he's mad at her. Later, her dad, figures that he is gone for good, and he gives his wife to another man because he took off. He left. He didn't take her home to his house. He left her at Dad's house, which meant that he didn't want her anymore. So he comes back sometimes later to get his wife, and the dad said, what do you mean your wife? I gave her to another man, that guy over there. That got him even more angry. And he goes off and he burns up a lot of real estate for the Philistines. Kills a lot of people. Remember, it's what he began to do. Now, he begins his judgment over Israel for a while. He kills a lot of people. Not only that, he takes one point where, remember the story, he's got the jawbone of an ass, and he kills hundreds of people, thousands, with just the jawbone of an ass. There were a lot of famous stories in his life where he was just killing people. That's what he did. He set fields on fires. Remember the story where he took the foxes and he tied their tails together, and he would put a stick of fire in between their tails, and he'd light their tails on fire, and when they ran, they would catch the fields of the Philistines on fire too. So he was dedicated to the Lord. This is the good stuff so far. He was a Nazirite. A Nazirite is somebody who is dedicated to the Lord. You don't cut your hair. You don't have a girlfriend. You don't eat anything that is unclean. You don't have any wine, no grapes, no raisins, nothing that comes from the vine. That's all part of your Nazirite vow. You're supposed to be a man of prayer, somebody who belongs to the Lord. But you could see he's already not doing that. But let's go. Let's talk about just the good for a minute. He was dedicated to the Lord as a baby. He was a Nazirite. He's known for his strength, and we just enumerated some of those strong things that he did. Whenever we think of Samson, we always think of big, strong people, right? He's also located in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. He's listed as one of those of faith. Now, as he's starting his life out, we don't see a whole lot of faith. He disobeyed God in marrying the wrong woman, because he didn't marry a Christian woman. He married somebody outside of his own religion, somebody outside of his own race. And God said you weren't supposed to. Jews are supposed to marry Jewish girls. Jewish girls should marry Jewish men. You have to marry somebody who believes the same thing you do. And of course, he didn't do it. But he still had faith. It might not have been to the end of his life, but Samson, at the very end, remember, is known for his faith. Remember, and we have to deal a lot with this when we deal with Delilah, but after he got his hair cut, he had lost his strength. So he had went to the middle of the building where all the Philistines were, and he felt with his hands because he couldn't see. And then he prayed and asked the Lord to let him do this one thing. His strength had all been gone. But Lord, give me the power right now to bring down this temple. And of course, God gave him an answer to that prayer, gave him the strength that was necessary, and he brought down the temple, killing more people in his own death than all the people he'd killed before. Huge, huge numbers. But again, just the beginning, because he didn't do it the right way, he never finished the job. But was a man of faith, as we had seen already. He began to free from the Philistines, we had said. Now, let's talk about the bad in his life. We note two things. First of all, he violated his vow. A vow is a promise you make to God. And if you make a promise to God, you have to keep it. Well, he made a promise, but he didn't keep it. His parents made a promise. They didn't keep it either, because the parents were the ones who went and got him the non-Jewish wife. They're the ones who gave in first. Of course, maybe it was intimidating to have that big, strong kid, but still, you don't get intimidated. You stand by what God says to do, always. And so he violated his vow. Parents violated their vow. No wonder things aren't going right in our story. Morally, he is weak, and we're going to get to that now in the second half of this. But he had great physical strength, but morally he was corrupt. He couldn't do what God wanted him to do. He just had trouble with it. He was always known for his strength physically, but he just couldn't, he never met a woman that he could say no to. And that's part of his problem. The lessons from his life, a couple of them. First of all, physical strength is lost without moral strength. Don't care how big and strong you are. If you're not as strong here as you are here, you got nothing. Number two, God's presence does not make us perfect. Even though the Holy Spirit would come upon Samson and give him great strength, it didn't make him any better a man, did it? Because the Bible says that the Spirit is subject to the prophet. That is, although God is in my life and God is around me, I could turn him off when I want. God can't make me do what I don't want to do. He can only offer me an opportunity to serve him, but I can always, like Samson, not do it. Although God is present, it doesn't make us better. We wish it did. We wish that somehow, but God says that His Holy Spirit would be subject to us. We're not slaves. We have to willingly and wantingly serve God. How much of our time do we spend saying no to God? You figure, as big and strong, as powerful as God is, He could have made Samson do what he wanted. But He couldn't, and He didn't, and He wouldn't. Nor does He make us robots who walk around, yes, Lord, yes, Lord. I wish sometimes that He would. I probably would be happier, but He doesn't. I won't be perfect till I get to heaven, and neither will you. Samson certainly wasn't, although he did make it into the Hall of Faith, didn't he? After all, God uses faith and not our talent, is our third point. Your gifts and abilities are great, but without faith, you can do nothing. Faith is the currency of all heaven. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. That's just what the book says. And so we have to bear that in mind. And the life of Samson bears that out. In the very last moment of his life, God didn't use his hair. God didn't use his great strength. God didn't use his sight, because Samson had none of those things. God used Samson's faith. And that faith connected Samson with God. Samson realized that what he had done was wrong. He asked God to forgive him, and he asked God to enable him. And although the rule of the Nazirite had not been followed, and Samson did not have the long hair that he required as a Nazirite, it's okay. God saw his faith, saw his desire, heard his apology, and faith is always what God uses in our life. So although he no longer had the physical strength, God gave him the strength needed to bring down that wall. It was a job bigger than Samson could ever have thought. That lion, Samson jumped off because he kind of figured, hey, I'm a match for that lion. He jumps off, tears the lion. All right, he's a match for it. But this, bringing down a whole temple, he is no match for it. So he prays and asks God for the power. God gives it. And that's why Samson is located in the Hall of Faith, because he finally learned to ask God. And that's what the Lord wanted. What is so important to God always is your faith. God doesn't care about anything else that you possess. He is concerned primarily with your faith. Now, the second person in our story, again, Hedy Lamarr pictures it here lovely for us, Delilah. Delilah is the other half of the Samson story. Here he is, big, strong, powerful, got his hair. He also got a woman with a razor in her hand. That's the problem with pretty girls. They're always ready to cut something. And so here we go. Men are brought down or built up by the women they have. Samson here, violating the rules. Is she a Jewish woman? No. He has problem with Jewish women, although he's supposed to be marrying Jewish women. He doesn't. He always goes for the Philistine and picks a fight. So this time, he sees this particular woman. She is one of those kind of women. Lives outside of town. Very well-to-do. Famous. To most. She had one good quality. You can't say a whole lot of good about Delilah because it just isn't there. But you know what I see in her? She never gave up, did she? The Philistines came to her and they said, listen, we need to know what makes Samson so strong so we can find a way to defeat him. What is the secret? Because his strength was bigger than his body. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger, as big as he is, can't lift a car, can't take on an army of 1,000 men by himself. And so they're looking at it and they say, well, whether or not he had a body build, it can't do what he is doing. No man can do what he is doing unless God is with him. So what's his connection with God? What is it that allows him to have this great strength? In the ancient world, there were always these talismans. There was always something that you kept in your hand that connected you with your particular deity that gave you strength. There was always a Lucky's rabbit's foot. There was always something that you had, a small idol, something that you kept near you all the time that drew power from your particular deity. So again, I was supposed to make that black and you can't see it, huh? So I'll have to read it to you. The good that I find in her is this one thing. She keeps coming to Samson and saying, what makes you so strong? And he keeps lying to her. Well, if you were to tie my hair to a pole, a green pole, I can't get away. So she ties his hair to a green pole. The Philistines are waiting there. And she says, Samson, the Philistines are here. And of course, he runs out, tears the pole, the whole show, everything goes. Well, if you weave my hair together, it makes me weak. All right, they weave the hair. Nothing again. Continually, she tests him. She asks him, what is the source of your strength? And for days and days, and see, he remembers his wife who came to him after 7 days and said, if you love me, tell me what is the story. What is the thing that is so strong, and what is the thing that is so sweet? So Delilah, because his first wife tricked him, he isn't so quick. So it takes Delilah really about twice as long to get the information. She is sobbing, she is crying. She's threatening to go away. He won't give in. He keeps tricking her. Well, if you tie green bands, if you were to tie my hands with grass, I'd be weak as any man. So she ties him up, waits for him to fall asleep, and then says, the Philistines are here. And of course, he tears the green ropes right off. Oh, I thought you loved me. But he doesn't give in. This gives Delilah the opportunity to be persistent. Now, truth is truth, no matter where you find it. And Delilah would be good for us to follow in one area and one area only. And that is in persistence. Remember when Jesus taught us to pray? He says, when you pray, be persistent. He gives us a couple of stories. He says there was the unjust judge, and the woman came to the judge and said, listen, I'm being persecuted by my neighbors. And the judge wouldn't hear her. And she kept coming to the judge and asking for the judge to deliver her from these troublemakers. And finally the judge says, I don't fear God and I don't fear men. But if I don't take care of this woman, she's wearing me down by constantly coming to me. That woman was persistent. Jesus told us another story. He said a man come at midnight, goes to bed, has his wife and his kids, they're all in bed, and his neighbor comes and knocks on the door and says to his neighbor, hey, I have a friend who just came on a far journey and I have nothing to give him. Can you please get up and give me some of your bread? I've got to feed. It was a custom of the Orient that you feed people when they arrive at your door. It's a custom in a lot of parts of the world. When I would visit people, for example, when I was in the Philippines, they would quickly send their children off to the store to get something. It may not have been anything more usually than a piece of buttered bread and a glass of Pepsi, but they would send their family to the store to get something when the preacher came or a visitor came to the house, and they would have something there for you to eat. And I can remember these people were so poor, and yet they would go out of their way to give me. It was almost the reason I was afraid to go and visit them, because I knew they couldn't afford to give me anything. But yet, as soon as I would come to the door and they would invite me in, they would find something to set before me. And this is very similar to the custom that Jesus grew up in. So the neighbor says, listen, I had a friend who has come on a far journey, and I have nothing to set before him. So please give me some of your bread. And the man says, listen, hey, I'm already in bed. I can't give you any bread. The man keeps knocking on the door. Give me some bread. Finally, Jesus says he won't give him the bread because he's his friend, but he'll give him the bread because he won't leave him alone. We call that importunity or persistence. And one thing that Delilah was she was persistent. She would not take no for an answer. She kept angling Samson until she got what she wanted. What is the source of your strength? And he told it to her. Took a long time. Samson knew he shouldn't trust women. He trusted his first wife, and look what it cost him. This isn't even his wife. Should he trust this woman? Why is she asking so hard? If I was Samson, I'd have just got away from the woman. She's trying to trick me for some reason. Hey, I'm out of here. There's always another tomato in town. But he's a sucker for her face, and he gets himself in trouble because he stays with her. But her persistence finally pays off, and Samson says to her, I'll tell you what, I've never cut my hair. I made a vow to God since I was a child. If I ever cut my hair, I will lose my strength. Well, he no sooner falls to sleep than guess what happens? The woman cuts off his hair. The Philistine army is waiting on the outside, and as she has done every night, she says to Samson, Samson, the Philistines are here. The Philistines are here. He jumps up and he says, you know what? I'm going to run away like I do every other night. But they catch him. And suddenly 2 men are able to hold him. He isn't strong like he was before. And suddenly the people catch him. They hold him. And they're very angry. So they take a hot knife. They stick it in the flame and get it red hot, and they stick it in one eye. And they boil his eye right out of his socket. Then they stick another knife in the fire, and they get that one red hot. And they stick that red, with him screaming, they stick that red hot knife in his other eye and boil out that eye as well. So now he's blinded. He's got no hair. He's got no strength. And now he's got no eyeballs. They boiled, stuck the knife in there, and boiled out his eyes. They literally went flat. So now he's blind. Why? Because he couldn't say no to a woman. Because he couldn't get out of her house. He didn't see the trouble that was coming his way. He thought he could handle it. He's big, he's strong. He's been tested before. But he broke his promise to God. He broke a lot of them. He had eaten and drank. He ate the grapes, drank the wine, saved the raisins. Things he wasn't supposed to do. There was only one promise that he hadn't broken all this time, and that was the promise not to cut his hair. And finally he breaks that one too. And he completely decimates his Nazirite vow. And so now he is trapped by the enemies of God and by his own sinfulness. That great strength, remember I told you earlier, great strength is of no value if it doesn't have moral strength to go with it. America, as strong as she is, mightiest nation on earth, but if she doesn't have moral strength, her strength will do her no good. Now, what was the bad about Delilah? Well, you could probably list off a whole bunch of stuff. You say, oh man, where do we start? Well, one of the first things, though, about Delilah is she She set too high a value on money. We will give you gold. We will give you silver. We will give you money if you get his secret for us. And she thought money was the most important thing in her life. She had been selling herself her whole life. For what? For money. She may have been pretty once, but was she still pretty when she was 60 or 70? I doubt it. 80? What she could get away with in her 20s and 30s, I'll guarantee she can't get away with in her 80s and 90s. It just doesn't work the same. So she had the value of money, but what does money get you? Eventually money is spent and all you have no one and nothing left. She had no family that we knew of. She had no friends. Who would want to be her friend knowing she'd sell you out for a couple of bucks? As famous as she is, she's really infamous. That's when you're famous for the wrong reason. She is infamous. She is known as a woman who valued money a little too highly. She sold herself. She sold her friends. She sold her soul for a couple of dollars. And when the money runs out, then what do you have? And the money always runs out. Second thing that I notice about her is that she betrayed the trust of others. Here was Samson. If he had no other quality with her, at least he trusted her to some degree. He told her his most dear secret. Something that he had only shared with his mom and dad. And now he shares it with her, Delilah. And the moment it hits Delilah's ear, it hits the ears of the Philistines. She didn't care about other people. She only cared about herself. People who place that high of value on money, that they would sell themselves and their friends, care nothing about you. They only worry about the money. We see that all the time, whether it's in politics or in religion or wherever you find it. When money's involved, it always corrupts people. So the lesson, I suppose, that you and I might learn from Delilah is be careful who you trust. Be careful who you trust. They might have a pretty face. They could be called Jack and be handsome. But you have to be careful who you trust. Make sure Jack really does wear a white hat, and that he's as handsome inside as he is on the outside. Make sure that his virtue goes all the way through. Because if we trust the wrong people, we can end up in a pretty sad mess. You want to make sure that the people you're trusting your soul with, in our case, Jesus, is he worth trusting? How many people died for those they loved? How many suffered what Jesus suffered, not for himself? There is no religious leader that did what he did. Others would tell people, oh, you know what, you ought to live like this, and you ought to do that, and you ought to do that. He didn't say that. He said, believe in me. He didn't tell us to go out and live a perfect life. He said, you can't do it. Let me live the perfect life for you. Jesus said, I'll tell you, here's how you're going to know if I'm telling you the truth. They're going to kill me. And they did. And when they kill me, I will be in the grave for 3 days. On the third day, if I'm telling you the truth, on the third day I will come back to life. And you will see me again. If I'm lying, you'll never see me again. But if I'm telling you the truth, and I'm really who I say I am, then I will raise from the dead, because only God can come back from the dead. And so, he laid his life down. He said, I give up my life. They don't take it from me. I lay it down. If I lay it down, I can pick it back up again. So he went to the cross. He was nailed there to prove that he was in control. While the other two men were still suffering, Jesus died because he said, I lay my life down. They were all surprised that he had died so soon. Remember that? It says Pilate marveled that he was already dead. When the Pharisees and the priests came and said, Jesus is dead, we'd like to make sure that no one steals his body. We'd like to guard it and protect it. What do you mean he's dead already? They usually wiggle on the cross a lot longer than that. But Jesus said, they didn't take my life, I laid it down. Remember, he opened his mouth and in a loud voice, he gave up the ghost. Jesus was always in control, even on the cross. I lay my life down, I take it up again. And so he laid his life down. They laid him in a tomb. And then on Sunday morning, he took his life back up again. And he went into town. He saw Mary and Peter and James and all the 12. He saw the two men on the road to Emmaus. He got back that evening. They met the apostles in the upper room. How do we know it's you? You know anybody that's got nail prints in their hands and in their feet? How about in my side? Come and see, it's really me. To make sure that you don't think that I'm a ghost, that you understand that I have bodily risen from the dead, that this is my body, give me something to eat. And he ate a broiled fish and a piece of a honeycomb. He said, ghosts don't eat food, do they? Like you see me eating. It really is me. 8 days later, he appeared to them all again. This time Thomas was there. Thomas said, I won't believe until I put my fingers in the prints of his nails. So Jesus walks in the room and says, oh, Thomas, I heard you wanted to stick your finger in here. Oh, hey, Thomas, I heard you wanted to put your hand up inside here. Do you want to put your finger in my feet too? My Lord and my God. Why? Because you did what you said you'd do. You laid your life down and you took it up again, proving that you're God. The resurrection is what proves who Jesus is. Nobody else in all of history died, was buried, and bodily rose again. Nobody. Nobody could ever make the claim that Jesus made. I am God. Here's the proof. I'll lay my life down. 3 days later, I'll take it back up again. Be careful who you trust. Make sure that the person you put your trust in is worthy of the trust. I know that I can trust Jesus. He proved that I could trust him by laying his life down and by taking it back up again. By showing he was God of very God. I know in whom I have believed. I know I can trust him. That's important in our life. Do you know who you can trust? If we trust in the wrong people, we'll make the wrong decisions. Sometimes we'll trust in the wrong people. We'll tell them secrets. And the next thing you know, everybody knows our secret. Because some people we just shouldn't have told those things to. Samson said to Delilah, you want to know my secret? You promise not to tell? You ever notice the first thing that someone always asks is, you promise not to tell? And we always say, I promise not to tell. And the second thing we do, when we go tell somebody, we say to that person, now do you promise not to tell? Just like I promised not to tell. Do you also promise not? Oh, I promise I won't tell. And what do? They find the third person. And the first thing they say to that third person, I'll tell you something, if you promise not to tell, like I promised and like they promised, will you promise just like we did? And they say, oh, I'll promise just like you. I ain't going to keep it any more than you kept it. You didn't keep it. He didn't keep it. She didn't keep it. Now here I am. And we always do that. I promise not to tell. And we ask the next person, do you promise not to tell? And they always say, oh, I promise, I promise, I promise. I won't tell. Step on a cat and spit in its eye. I won't tell anybody. Cross my heart and hope to die. I won't tell nobody. And do you cross your heart and hope to die? Oh, I do, I do. I won't tell anybody, as we tell them. But we always get a promise. The promise that was as worthless as the one we made. Worst thing in the whole world to keep is a secret. If you tell anybody, you've told everybody. It's just the way secrets go. So, Samson and Delilah. Two people we could learn something from. We learned from Samson that strength alone isn't enough. You got to have it in here. If it's going to matter, if you got it up here. And with Delilah, at least she knew how to keep after something until she got what she wanted. And Jesus says in prayer sometimes it's like that. You have to keep asking and keep asking and keep asking until you get it. One quality she had, she was persistent. And she got the answer she wanted. Samson trusted the wrong people. He trusted a woman who trusted only in money. Didn't love him. She loved what he could get him. Or he could get her. Lots of trouble. Father, we thank you so much for the stories of Samson and Delilah. We're grateful, dear Father, that Samson ultimately made the right decision and is forever recorded in the Hall of Faith. By faith, Samson, we're told. By faith, Samson brought down that temple. By faith. Not by sight, he had lost that. Not by keeping his promise, he had lost that. But he never lost trust in you. And when he turned his life over to you, you used him in the very end. And so, Lord, our lives may not be perfect, but if we should demonstrate some faith, then you can use us too. Help us, dear Father, to learn what Samson should have learned. Be careful who you trust. He trusted his first wife, it didn't work out. Trusted the second woman in his life, didn't work out. He should have learned to trust in the Lord. Trust in the Lord with all your might. Trust in the Lord with all your understanding, and he will direct your path. So tonight we choose to follow Jesus. We choose tonight to trust Jesus. In your name we pray.